Tuesday, January 12th, 2016. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Shaw?
Here.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Pauly? Here. Commissioner Mengelberg? Here. Mayor Holliday?
Here. You remembered me this time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so anybody got a future agenda item for a work session?
No.
We had discussed, and I think we're going to have it on the work session for the next work session to talk about the initiative petition 28 and try to see where the commission's going to be on that and have a resolution. And then we'd also talked about beginning the process of rules for marijuana should the other things come about. So is that something that's going to be coming up?
Yeah, it's going to take us a little bit to gear up to that. I'm pretty comfortable that, we're in a moratorium situation until November. So I think we'll work with staff, try to, get through a couple of projects we're trying to wrap up right now.
Sure.
And then, try to have a thoughtful process over the summer to get that in place.
Yeah, because
Spring,
it would
summer.
be, if we're going to be forced to do it, it would be nice to have the community's buy-in on, where it's going to be located and those kind of things, have that settled before it actually happens.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits too is we do get to see, quite a few jurisdictions have already dealt with time, place, manner regulations. So we won't be starting from zero with some of the work we'll be doing.
Commissioner Smith?
Another agenda item that probably is coming in the next couple of months I'd like to see is conversation about Ermatinger House. And I can probably talk to Tony about that when it gets closer, because I know that the Friends group is getting close to having a proposal. So I don't know if that would be best at a work session or probably a work session. But probably February or maybe when we have a city manager.
That might be a good idea.
And
But
just-
I would like to get it started before start on that, the conversation with the commission and the Friends group to start, so we can get that process going before the spring. See if we can get the house open by the spring or summer or something.
So is it done?
I think it's done.
It is. Excuse me. It is done. We you might remember last year we presented a programming study and talked about that with the commission. That we need to kind of review that, and I think the commission sort of asked the Friends group to make a proposal to the city, and that's what we're waiting for. I have a meeting with the Friends of the Ermatinger group in the next couple of weeks. It's on my calendar to start kind of fleshing that out a little bit more. So in the coming few weeks, we'll have hopefully something to present back to the commission on that.
Okay.
Just to clarify, for the Proposition 28, you were asking that for another work session, so the February work session, if we could get that lined up? Or?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so before we get started, at the request of staff, we're going to reverse items 3D and 3A. So we're going to take 3E first, just so the building official can go home instead of sitting through another.
Sorry, we wanted to change 3D and 3E.
That's what I just said.
Oh, sorry, I thought I heard 3A.
Did I say 3A?
I think you did.
At the end, yeah.
Okay, whatever. So here we go. 16-002, Oregon City System Development Charge, SDC Forum Update and Discussion. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you again for your interest and your time in SDCs. So tonight we wanted to provide you a little bit of an update on some of the community engagement we've been working with regard to SDCs. John and Libby, if you want to step up here, we'll bring you on and introduce you. So the City Commission has been clear that growth in Oregon City is important. Smart growth in Oregon City is important, and it's critical to the continued success of Oregon City. The expectation that the City Commission has said is we do need to work with our community stakeholders and find responsible solutions for development fees. I think, Mary, you said it nicely in the forum, find ways to get to yes. And so we continue to work on that, and we want to to meet that expectation. So on September 24th, 2015, we had a collaborative forum for SDCs. We called it Collaborative Forum on SDCs from the ground up. Libby Barg was our facilitator, who's sitting before us today. She's with Barney Worth and Associates, and she's going to share some of the results of the forum. And since the forum, Libby has met with the Oregon City Chamber of Commerce and gotten a little more feedback from them. And internally, we've met as well. We included John Ghilarducci, who's with the FCS group, who does a lot of the city's financial analysis. I know we do a lot of that internally, but just staying familiar with laws with regard to rates and SDCs, we rely on the FCS group to help us and guide us based on our needs, but really kind of get regional understanding of these issues and the latest and greatest on SDC rates and charges. So with that, I'm hoping we can pull down our presentation. So I guess I'd like to reiterate that that through the forum, the city has provided additional information and content on the city's website. So that forum information is on the website. We've also created an SDC fact sheet and an SDC question and answer sheet. The video that Willamette Falls Media Center recorded during the forum was been recorded, and Melody Ashford, by the way, did an outstanding job of taking the video and interfacing it with the presentation and some of the results that came out of that. So now when you listen to the video, it's truly informed with the results that Libby took in the polling information. So it's about as entertaining as you can get when you're talking about things like SDCs and fees. So they really did a good job with that. So I just want to make a shout out for that, because the intent was to have a tool that we could use in the future to help refer folks to that are confused about SDCs.
So when Mr. Lewis says Melody, he actually means the Willamette Falls Media Center.
That's true. Melody and all her friends over there at the Willamette Falls Media Center do a great job. And so with that, we're going to kick into this, and I think Libby's going to start with some of the results of the forum and some of what we heard in a kind of a condensed form, and then John and I will tag team on some of the other details.
We're controlling this. All right. We'll just start with some highlights from the meeting, and then I'll go into just a couple of the details of what we heard. But as John said, the forum was held in response to concerns about SDCs in Oregon City. And I think we saw that was a very well-attended forum. The mayor attended to, and there was plenty of people interested in SDCs. I was actually surprised how many people are interested. Another highlight: participants strongly support the use of SDC revenues to help pay for future infrastructure. And their overriding concern, it wasn't just one SDC that concerned them, but the overarching burden of all the SDCs. And one exception to that is the SDC calculation for redevelopment, which is widely thought to be unfairly high and a disincentive for business recruitment. That's kind of the highlights from the forum. A few of the details: there's generally a low level of understanding of city finances and master planning. So this is participants scoring themselves on a scale of 1, they don't know anything, to 7, that they know a lot. City finances and infrastructure master planning, kind of below the middle. So generally not a lot of understanding. Before John presented any information to them, we asked what their perception was of Oregon City's SDCs, and 38% of attendees thought that Oregon cities were higher than other cities. Only 3% thought that they might be lower, and probably not also surprising, but 36% were just not sure about how they compare. We asked them if there was any particular SDC that they had concerned about, and of those, 56 said their questions were about all of them. So the other 44% they were able to select different SDCs. They're worried about transportation, did top that chart at 19%, parks, stormwater, and wastewater was at the bottom at 3%. And this slide is just to show you how SDCs actually do compare to other cities. This is for specialty retail, and you can see it's higher on the list, but it's not the highest. And for residential, John tells me for residential, with this list of cities that you're comparing to, Oregon City is about middle of the pack. This result, I think, would be very interesting to you. We asked participants what their expectations of the city was for future development, and 91% of participants, and I've never seen a number this high, say that the city, they expect you to plan and build capacity for future homes and business. There's no sense that you shouldn't be investing in infrastructure and future infrastructure. A strong desire for the city to be doing that. In fact, there were no votes for the other options that were kind of scale back or don't do as much as that you're doing. John and I, before the forum, went out and did stakeholder interviews with developers and businesses, and we had a list of ideas they had, which they thought would help with the SDCs, this feeling that the SDCs might be too high or there's some issues with them. So these 4 ideas were tested at the forum. We had roundtable discussions, and we did polling on them, and they include reducing SDCs for redevelopment, reducing the project list, have ratepayers pay a greater share of the development costs, so through rates instead of SDCs to pay for it, and discount rates for special districts, so more special district areas. And we polled on that, and the question there was which options are best for Oregon City. And I would draw your attention to the option that says new development continues to pay. So kind of not the no change, but that it's okay the way that it's working right now, which scored the highest at 5.81, strongly agreed that new development should continue to pay. And I think that goes back to that 91% who kind of expect there to be infrastructure in place for the future. The second highest scoring one, very close, is the reduced SDCs for redevelopment. And then some other current users, they're farther down the list, including reducing the project list, which scored the lowest. And John's going to talk in more detail about these ideas that we heard from forum participants.
We wanted to respond to some of the polling that John and Libby had done, and try to. So what we did as part of the forum was talk about, for example, for the idea of reducing SDCs for redevelopment. We went through what some of the alternatives are for doing that. How you might achieve that, and what some of the considerations are. And we did that for a couple of the other issues too. Some of which didn't get as much traction as this one did, as Libby just described. So just a little bit more about this, the idea of reducing SDCs for redevelopment. What the city does currently, as you may recall, is when there is redevelopment of a currently developed site, the new development pays only the incremental additional SDC over and above the SDC that would be charged for the current use of that property. In the case of a vacant piece of developed property, there had been a time limit of 18 months, so you only got that credit for a short time. That was something that the commission acted upon to change and make it better for redevelopment, and extended that limit to 10 years. So now, if a property's been vacant for 10 years and it's redeveloped, only after that 10-year period would the new development have to pay a full SDC again. They would get that credit for the last use for that whole 10-year period if it's redeveloped in that time frame. One of the alternatives would be to eliminate the time limit altogether, so that would make it even easier to redevelop vacant developed land. You could also, the city could, when looking at the current use, they could go back and basically take the highest use in the history of that site and give them credit for that. So it wouldn't just be the current or most recent use, it would be the historical highest use. That would reduce the amount of the incremental SDC that a redevelopment would pay. Another idea, the city can always draw a circle around an area like downtown, for example, where it wants to incentivize redevelopment and just buy down the SDCs in that area, as long as they're doing it with an outside source of funds. In other words, you can't do it within the SDC program, but you could do it from the general fund, for example, or some other source of funding outside the SDC program. You can also, and we'll come back to that special districting, you can charge different SDCs in different parts of a city as long as the costs support it. So if we had a cost based, in other words, if it was lower cost to develop or to provide facilities in the downtown, you could actually calculate a lower SDC in that area that would again result in lower fees for redevelopment. You never really know what you're going to get when you start a project like that. Sometimes you get counterintuitive results, but and you can also sometimes in a downtown area, a lot of the existing infrastructure was built with general tax money, so that could result in a reduced SDC in the downtown core specifically. So those are some alternatives, and the considerations you see on the right there. One of the issues with eliminating the time limit for vacant land is the capacity that development originally purchased may not really exist anymore, so it might be hard to say that they shouldn't pay a full SDC again. You always want to make sure that you're incentivizing timely redevelopment, and you're balancing the complexity of your approach against something that staff can administer fairly easily. The SDC program is already pretty complex here. You need data to calculate some of these options, and as I mentioned, sometimes you get results that you don't expect. So those are just some pros and cons and alternatives if the commission decides they like to pursue one of these ideas or an evaluation of these ideas for reducing SDCs for redevelopment.
One thing I didn't mention in my opening, which I'm realizing I should have mentioned, was tonight is about just sharing with you the results of the forum. It's also for sharing you some of the ideas that we're planning to pursue and bring back to you in one form or another, whether it be a recommendation and a resolution, another work session, or a code change. So we're not recommending the recommendations that we're going to give you tonight are much more about trying to get some buy-in on whether or not we're headed in the right direction, or if you hear any fatal flaws that you just go, I'm not into that at all. That might be helpful to hear, but all these alternatives that John listed right here, they're topics that we want to drill into deeper in the future. So just kind of wanted to share that. I guess the other thing that I wanted to mention on that last slide, John, that I think we might have missed is, Greg, you're in the audience, and I think I got permission to talk a little bit about a specialty item that I'd like to bring to you sooner than later, because it involves property that Craig manages, which is a question about credits and extension of some credits. And this is a topic that we'll probably bring to you in the next meeting. When Craig redeveloped, when your company redeveloped the Hilltop Mall, at that time we had a credit that allowed for them to, they basically built a smaller footprint than what they had before. So they got credits in the form of kind of a piece of paper that said, when you come in to redevelop with more development on that particular piece of property, you can use that credit. And in our code, it says that's a 5-year credit. And that's one of those areas where we're probably going to recommending staying consistent with the 10-year decision that you made for the other credits. I think it's appropriate for this use. We don't see a lot of downsizing typically, especially with commercial development, but in your case, that's what happened. At the end of the day, I think that site's going to probably utilize all of those credits and then pay some in addition to that. But there's a time limit that's coming up with Craig's, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge that and make that decision. That's your decision to make as to whether or not we'd want to expand that. I'm going to recommend that we do meet that 10-year threshold as opposed to a 5-year threshold. So I just wanted to throw that out there. It's not for a decision tonight, but that's something we're planning to bring back to you sooner than later. So this is a slide that I wanted to add in. The project list status report. I think what we heard and what we agreed to, with some level of analysis yet to happen, but the fact that we've got these master plans that we've adopted, and they come with capital improvement lists with them. So we adopted the water master plan, we adopted the transportation system plan, we adopted the sewer master plan. All those documents have been adopted by the City Commission. And so there is some acknowledgement that the CIP in those documents has been adopted as well, but I think we could take that another level and make sure that we get full through confirmation that those CIP lists are also adopted, so that we're using a capital list to help make decisions on, for instance, when should we reimburse a developer that maybe is building a particular project. If it's on the CIP list and listed as funded, we have the latitude to go ahead and make that recommendation, give them some reimbursement for that in the form of a credit or a check. If we haven't fully adopted that list, other than through the master plan, I think we run into some problems there. So we'd like to bring some of that information back to you in a resolution form, essentially adopting a new list. We may have had an old list, like in the case of the water master plan, and some of those projects may have changed, so we're wanting to bring forth the new list, make sure it's clear to you what is on the list and what's not on the list. So we hope to bring that to you fairly soon. The other thing, in the case of the water rates and the sewer rates, we kind of hung up on the amount of the rate themselves, right? So we were limited on the water rate to 3%. We talked a fair amount about the fact that we needed to, in order to fund some of the capital needs of the program, we needed more than that. That's still a conversation that needs to come back. But what we didn't do in either the water or the sewer master plan was adopt. We didn't bring back the SDC analysis part to that. We talked a bunch about rates, but we didn't bring back the SDC analysis. So we want to bring that back, and maybe that's in a work session. We need to talk more about that. But I just think it's important for you to know that we've done some of the work on capital lists. We've done some of the work on adoption of SDCs. For the transportation SDC, we elected to kind of keep that rate flat based on what it was before and not increase it. So we built a capital list around the fee. We basically worked backwards to get there. And so I guess last but not least, the stormwater master plan, that's underway right now. We haven't completed a stormwater master plan since 1988. So it's time to update that plan as well. And when that happens, behind that will come a rate study and SDC analysis, and we'll try and bring that to you as well.
So we talked about the perception that the project list is too big, and I think by the end of the forum, some of the feedback we got was that maybe that wasn't an issue that people were as enthusiastic about by the end of the meeting. And I think the reason is because we did talk about ways to try to get the SDCs down, and they don't necessarily mean reducing the size of the project list. That is an alternative. Another alternative is to shorten the planning period. Instead of looking 20 years, look at 10 years. The only issue with that is you're also then reducing the denominator in the charge calculation, and sometimes you end up with a charge that's the same or higher if you shorten the planning period. The one thing that that is also an option is to leave the project list as comprehensive as possible, or intact if it's a master plan. And if you don't like the answer, essentially adopt a reduced or discounted system development charge, you will then, by definition, under-recover the full cost of the project list. But the advantage of doing that, as opposed to taking projects off the list, is that the city then still has the flexibility to spend SDC proceeds on any project that's on that list. So you can still prioritize and spend the money as you see fit as a city. If you take projects off the list, then you can no longer spend SDC proceeds on those projects. So that was something that people seem to understand conceptually. We also talked about the idea of discounted rates for special districts, and this really means area-specific or sub-area charges based on the cost of providing infrastructure in those areas. And you can choose to do a whole lot of different areas or not. I do tend to caution folks on doing a lot of these different special district fees. They can be divisive. You can end up with really strong disincentives to develop in certain areas and not others that are in close geographic proximity. It can be hard to explain. So this, again, is one of those where you really have to balance the complexity against what you're trying to gain, and how easy it is to administer.
I think this is my slide. So really, again, trying to provide information but not get ahead of ourselves with the analysis that we have yet to fully complete. So these are next steps, and hopefully we've got your blessing to move forward with these. So we definitely want to continue to educate and provide information through various forms. Regular SDC forums are probably not, but the planning departments have been having forums monthly, I think, and so continue to work that avenue to educate. Although most of those folks are the ones who know the most about SDCs, so trying to keep others that are less informed about SDCs in the know is kind of a challenge, and we see that as being website and some of these tools that we've already created. I do think sooner than later we need to bring forth these SDC project capital lists and better explain those and look at that water and sewer SDC rate for adoption from the City Commission. I've already kind of looked pretty hard at the code and recognized there's some things like this timing issue with credit times that we'd like to bring before you and incorporate any of the other code changes that come out of work sessions that probably another work session that would have more detail on what kind of code changes we're proposing. Before we get there, we need to do a little bit of investigation work with John mostly on how we might look at some of these redevelopment options. We don't want to necessarily under-collect because we still have a lot of needs out there, but look at options that kind of help soften that blow for redevelopment in particular. And then continue to get buy-in. I mean, I think the business community has given us good feedback in that they're hearing the right things. It's just, I think, at the end of the day, they want to see the right actions as well. And then after getting that feedback, bring that back to the City Commission for final authorization and deep specific decisions. So that's kind of our presentation, and we're open to questions.
Questions?
I've got quite a few. So, first of all, I'm really glad you're looking at this now. Development is back in the upswing, and if we're going to make changes, we want to do it now so we can take advantage of this growth and not miss the opportunity. Secondly, so they do get credit for past SDCs that are paid, so that's really good to hear. That's kind of a common practice, but that would help with redevelopment. I like the idea of having sub-areas, and I understand the concern of having too many, but perhaps having one in the downtown core would be a logical place, because we really are focusing on having a thriving Main Street, and we're trying to incentivize different types of development that may not pencil on its own, like mixed-use development. So having some way to reduce SDCs to make that happen would be really great. There may be also a window of opportunity for reductions for certain types of development that we want to incentivize. Mixed-use development would be one, ground floor retail with upper story housing or office. Also, affordable housing is recently on our radar screen, so what can we do to incentivize some of these things that the marketplace may not be providing on its own? We also might want to incentivize higher density, because in theory, they're not using more system, they're providing more jobs or more housing or things that we want. So their SDCs should be lower, right, based on their actual impact.
Depending on the service and, yeah, the particular demands of the development, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, generally, yeah.
Okay, and let's see. The other thing that I encourage you and Mr. Lewis to do is take a fresh look at the project list periodically, not just the items on the list, but updating the costs, because new technology comes along all the time. One example might be green streets. The city's been pretty proactive about building that out in certain places. Well, that reduces the demand for storm drainage. Are we properly accounting for that? Are we looking at the actual cost of that project in the bigger picture, not just that project? So those are my thoughts.
Anybody else?
No, having a continued education on SDCs is always good, John, so appreciate that.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Do we have another forum set up, or are we kind of done collecting data and now we're ready to list different potential updates and get feedback on that?
Another forum's not out of the question. We haven't set one up yet. I think we made good progress. I mean, that forum was in September. We made good progress with that, and then we kind of lost the momentum, and now we're, I feel like we're back to, we've got a new contract with John to kind of look further at some of the feedback. Now, how do we move forward with some of the analysis that goes into that? So I'm not opposed to it. I see Amber's in the audience. She was a sponsor before, so if that would be, we did hear from, I don't remember the percentage, but quite a few folks who were willing to come back and spend another, we didn't specify 3 hours, but we took 3 hours of their time that morning, which was important time. But I think this is an important enough topic that we could probably get more folks in the room again to kind of hear what's next, the specifics of some of these.
Yeah, take the temperature a little bit and see what works. Okay.
The other thing I just want to mention on that, some of the ideas that Commissioner Mengelberg had. So we have a special zone, mixed use downtown zone that we have made. I could probably explain it, but you could probably do a better explanation of where that's at.
I think it's a 10% reduction in trip generation in the central corridor.
Yeah.
Which
is the Main Street corridor, Moala, and
7th. Yeah.
And it's built around, just that idea of reduced trips because people are, in theory, living and working in the same area.
Proximity to transit was another part of the rationale for that reduction.
Yeah.
There's better proximity to transit.
Anybody else? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have 16003 draft intergovernmental agreement IGA for the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. Mr. Conkle.
So thank you, Mayor. Evening, Commissioners. So we're handing out some information right now. I'm just going to go ahead and call up Christina Robertson-Gardner and Catherine Krieger. Obviously, Christina is our senior planner here, led up the Willamette Falls Legacy Project visioning process, and is the project manager for the Development Opportunities Study for the recently successful Community Planning and Development grant that we applied for. As you may recall, Catherine Krieger is the Willamette Falls Legacy Project Manager from Metro, so she is the dedicated staff to represent all the partners as we work through the Riverwalk and the overall Willamette Falls Legacy Project coordination. So, we had a little bit of a delay. Catherine's going to talk a little bit about the revised finance plan that we worked out with the state and the budget for the intergovernmental agreement that I'm going to walk you through here. And then Christina's going to follow up after Catherine, talking a little bit about the development opportunity study. So we'll try to move through this as quick as we can, but please ask any questions as we're going along. So part of what you have before you tonight, the attachment for the intergovernmental agreement for the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. Our goal was, so we're updating all of the partners. We met with you several months ago and kind of had a term sheet, so laid out the principles of what this intergovernmental agreement would do. Essentially, we're looking to create an entity that authorizes the expenditure of funds and the utilization of resources, and making sure that we have a collaborative process that's well coordinated as we're not only working on the Riverwalk, but incorporating the private property, because it was so important that as we're making decisions on the Riverwalk or on the private property, those impact one another significantly. So how are we going to accomplish that? And this IGA lays out the partners' responsibilities, how we will be allocating and responsible for the funds that we've been entrusted with to complete this project, the coordination, the roles of each of the agencies, partners as we're going through this process. So we're going to be presenting this the last Friday of this month. We have a partners meeting. We'll be presenting this to the partners. Assuming that is successful, we'd be coming back to each of the organizations for them to adopt it during one of the regular city commission or county commission meetings with that. So before you, I'll just go through this pretty quick. On the intergovernmental agreement, starting on page 1, we have the recitals. It's essentially talking about how we got to where we're at today, beginning with the bankruptcy, going through the initial work that we did, through the visioning process, the allocation, the successful awarding of funds from the state, both the $5 million and the $7.5 million. Talking about the community planning and development grant as we get onto page 2, and the match from the property owner. So we received $550,000 through the CPDG grant, $450,000 from the property owner, and additional funds being put in by Oregon City and Clackamas County. So that would make up the development opportunity study, which would be on the private property, running concurrently with the Snøhetta dialogue work that's happening on the Riverwalk. This really encapsulates this on page 2, are subsections N and O, talking about the need to create a decision-making and organizational structure among the public entities, public entities, that the parties can deliver unified direction and message to outside parties. The Legacy Project is a model of fiscal discipline, efficiency, and accountability. The parties have clarity on scope, schedule, and budget for all aspects of the Legacy Project. And the parties can effectively collaborate with the owner in Portland General Electric. And really that's what we're trying to accomplish here. It's providing the governance structure for the entire project, and we're putting it for the next 2 years is what we're estimating. As we get into page 3, really is talking about definitions. Page 4, we get into the authority. So the authority to appropriate funds once the budget is approved by the partners, that the technical advisory committee and the working groups have the ability to work within those budgets and making slight adjustments to them. And the decision making, authorizing us to make decisions on behalf of our organizations through this partnership as we work through both the development opportunity study as well as the Riverwalk design and engineering. Then we get into on page 5, section 4.1, the roles of the working groups. So you can remember we had that diagram where we laid out the 3 working groups focusing on the Riverwalk, infrastructure, economic development. Those funneled up to the technical advisory committee, which we've been meeting weekly for over 5 years now, working on this project. And then you had the partners group, and those were kind of the layers of work and decision-making through this. So this lays out what the roles are, generally speaking, for those. So where you have the working groups focusing on those specific subtasks, working within the scopes that have been approved, making sure we're on budget, products that are being created are appropriate. Working up through then, above that, you would have the technical advisory committee that's made up of staff representative from each of the partners group. As there are decisions that need to be made, they will go up to the technical advisory committee, budget adjustments that are appropriate to be made at that level. Anything brought up from a working group where there's not consensus gets brought up to the technical advisory committee to make a decision to then provide direction back down to the working groups. And then you have the partners group that's made up of 2 elected officials and the chief administrator officer for each of the partners. Right now we're proposing they meet quarterly. They can meet more frequently as necessary or if called to do so. The partners group are really focusing on the overall project budget, the milestones. There could become a time, we've talked about this for a while, remember our 4 values and they all overlapped. At some point there may be decisions that need to be made that could impact the values. And as those larger policy decisions need to be made, that's where the partners group would make those decisions. As a subgroup of the, we would also have a financial oversight subcommittee, a subgroup of the TAC that would be responsible for essentially preparing us for audits, following, making sure the money is being spent appropriately, accounted for. And that subcommittee would be made up of representatives from each of the partners to fill that role of the financial oversight of the project as we're working through this. So once again, sorry, I'm going really quick, but I'm pretty comfortable. We've been working with Metro on this. I believe that this implements the discussion that we had a couple months ago about what we were trying to achieve through this. We did have our attorney look at it. So at this point, I think I've hit most of the highlights. Catherine can fill me in if I've missed something, or if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them before we move on to some of the discussion about the budget and then into the development opportunity study update.
So I think the only thing is to keep you informed. One of the stretch goals that we gave ourselves at the TAC level is to begin to understand who the owner might be for the Riverwalk. So I remember I mentioned that the last time I was here, and I don't want to bury that because that's a really important topic. So we, in the IGA, we gave ourselves a goal of early summer to do that, and it would coincide with the beginning of concept design. I suspect we won't get there 100%, but what we're doing now is putting together a scope of work to understand what that means. So what we'll do is look at all of the options, interview our counselors, see what it really is going to take, or what would it take for any particular entity to own it, or a combination of entities, or a nonprofit, and if so, what are those things? If not, why not? So that we can have a target to get to.
That would be, it's on page 5, section 5.6, talks about setting up, trying for June of this year to make some significant progress on ownership. Trying to design this facility without knowing who's owning it is something that we need to address.
It's a chicken and egg thing, because you also want to know what you might want to own. So we need to do enough work so that people know the direction that it's headed until we can really make any kind of.
So do we want to own it?
Scott? No.
Yes, Scott.
I think we have a great
I've heard
process.
multiple opinions on the subject. I think
Yeah.
we would probably want to get together and have a more focused discussion on the pros and cons and whatnot associated with that.
Copy that. Okay.
So is the design work on schedule to be completed in June 2016?
Well, I'm happy to announce that we are executing the contract this week. So we're really just starting the work.
Okay.
We've been doing scoping and then working on the finance plan for the state. So we're excited that I can actually tell you that now that we're going to be executing. We'll probably have our first public meeting workshop, I'm guessing would be March.
Okay.
Okay, so on the budget side, you have two pieces of paper in front of you. The first one is a budget just for the Riverwalk, because that's the biggest portion of the work for the Lima Falls Legacy Project. We really needed to focus in more detail on that. And the second one is a budget for the next 2 years. That's the other part of the IGA. It's a 2-year term. And so this is for this fiscal year and 2016, 2017, and all of the different sources and uses. So on the first one, what the TAC is proposing is an approach to the budget, which is first a look at the whole project that would include the Riverwalk and open spaces. In the visioning plan, the total cost for that was about, the Riverwalk was like 30 to 40 million, the open space, including the open space, it was 60 to 80 million. So we didn't want to sort of narrow our sights in the very beginning phases of the work. We really wanted to be visionary, to understand what is the potential for this site. So we set a target for the overall Riverwalk and open space of about $60 million. We don't know what that includes yet. We will certainly, be gathering input from you and others to figure out what would be included in that. And it certainly is not all public money. It is, right now we know the funds that we have are about 19 million, and we know that it's really up to sort of the vision and the ambition of the partners to see what this project can, how much fundraising can be given to this project in public, private, and also from additional partner money. So we don't want to limit ourselves. So the first part, when it says concept design, they're looking at the whole concept of the project. So we're giving a really broad brush over everything, but we'll have a preferred plan for the whole site. And then the second two parts, construction documents and permitting construction, will be on the first initial project. And that is a $25 million project. So because we feel like 25 is a prudent target, we're calling this we've been calling this, how do we dream with discipline? So this is our way of dreaming with discipline, so that we have 18.5, 19 million, and then we're proposing that we think we can fundraise up to 25 million for this first initial project. So we have a target, and it helps actually for fundraising to have the target. Plus the concept design, that big vision, will help us also do fundraising so that people will get excited about the project. So that was our approach, the TAC approach to the budget. Any questions on that? And then on the second part, the 2-year budget, the pieces that are included on the Riverwalk portion are the concept design, and then this is pretty small, sorry, it's also 20% of construction documents, which would be that first initial project, and everything that goes along with that. These funds, all these funds include staffing, they include materials and services, and so they're total project costs. So that includes soft costs and in this other first one, the hard costs to actually build the project. And then you can see the sources across the bottom, and the 1.5 million is a significant amount of money that thank you, Oregon City, for stepping up on that. It's really a significant part of these first 2 years of the project. I think that's about it, unless you have questions.
Commissioner Pauly?
Yes, you mentioned 60 million for like everything, just like thinking big, not trying to limit you. And then you mentioned the 24. So is that number just to get access out to the falls? Is that what you're focusing on now, and not the open spaces, but just
We
pretty much
definitely,
that?
our money is tied to getting public access and a view of the falls, yes. We don't know exactly where or how that will happen in the initial phase.
But that's kind of that first project that you're talking about. Okay.
And that was contingent, if you may recall, in the original $5 million. Was part of the part of the requirements we had to meet was providing access and a view to the access along the river and view of the falls. So the hard part is, how big is phase one going to be? I mean, we have to do some of this initial work to be able to say that.
But we've resolved that issue with the state.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just think it's good to be clear to the public. We're talking about that initial phase, really getting access out there for them.
Right.
Prominent view of the falls, I
Yes.
believe, was the magic.
Yeah, the magic word.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I am kind of in the cleanup mode here. Just to remind you, we've talked a little bit about the Community Planning and Development Grant and what we call the DOS, the Development Opportunity Strategy, that we'll be working with Falls Legacy. And just like we have Dream with Discipline, I'm going to keep using the word integration every time I talk to you. And some of the main goals of that is, how do we leverage the work we're doing on the Riverwalk with Falls Legacy LLC? So we say we both have work we have to do. Let's put our money together and get a product that is more than the sum of its parts. So that's the great goal. And so now we're really just in the details of how do we get there. And, signing the IGA is really important because it starts to give direction to staff to kind of do our job. So we're really excited for that to move forward. So the DOS, the whole idea is this development opportunity strategy is parallel to the Riverwalk work. So how we are setting up the deliverables and work products, they're going to be responding and integrating with the different Riverwalk products. What you'll be seeing in the next month or two will be both the grant with Metro. We received our money for the big check that we received this fall. We'll actually have an IGA. And then what we're calling a pre-development agreement with Falls Legacy. So we have a lot of great ambition about how to do this, but there's going to be a lot of devil in the details. And so that pre-development agreement kind of talks about how the phasing goes about, the disbursement of funds, and then we're going to be identifying key trigger points in the process where we pause and we both agree to move forward, and there may be products or deliverables out of those trigger points, and they're going to be lining up with the Riverwalk. So that's what we're working on with Falls Legacy right now. So when we, at some point in the next month or two, we'll be coming back with that pre-development agreement, and that's what we, as Oregon City, will be signing with Falls Legacy, that we kind of agree on how we best move forward with this part of the project. The Falls Legacy is actually meeting with the Riverwalk design team at the end of January to get a better handle on what they can bring to the table, and so we're really excited about that. And we think after that meeting we can start moving forward with kind of that big list of IGAs and contracts we can move forward, but we're kind of waiting for that meeting at the end of January to happen. I think that's kind of the big updates I wanted to give you, so I'm available if you want to ask any questions.
Thank you.
All right, good work.
Thanks. Good job.
So we're on to 15688, proposed resolution number 1601, modifying the building division fee schedule to provide a complete list of division fees. Mr. Conkle?
Thank you, Mayor. Evening, Commissioners. I'd like to ask Mike Roberts, our building official, to come on up. In the staff report, I talked a little bit about every 4 years, each building inspection program within the state of Oregon must apply to renew the building program is administered by the State Building Codes Division. So we are in the process of updating ours right now. One of the things that Mike took on was to look at our fees. They have not been updated since the year 2000. And so what we were seeing were we were providing services, and Mike can talk a little bit more about this with examples, or there were services being provided which we really didn't have a fee or a line item to charge them to. So really it's trying to clean up and account for the services that we do provide as part of our renewal with the building, with the state of Oregon on their building program. So I can go ahead and turn it over to Mike. He can talk about some of the work he's done with some of the building community and outreach on this, and the fees themselves.
Well, I have a question first. So this has always been a pet peeve of mine, that we in government allow something to go for 15 years without looking at it. Do we have some of these programs now on like a 5-year schedule or something where we don't go 15 years without changing things?
I think,
I guess I'm asking from a more global standpoint
Right.
than just the building fees.
Right, and I think, what we've done is, with a lot of our fees, we've been consistent about going back, tying those to inflation, that they go up automatically every year. I think this is one of the, we finally started to catch up, whether it be system development charges of doing master plans and SDC fees associated with that we had not done for a long, long time. So I think, yes, starting to try to get into that cycle of revisiting these more often. But, for example, the comprehensive plan. Somehow it's been 11 years already. So these things do tend to slide by. But that being said, yes, looking at fees and having a more structured a way to review those and update those, I believe, is being put in place. Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening. So as Mr. Conkle said, every 4 years the building department is required to apply to reassume or to assume the program and to keep the program. It's on a 4-year cycle. So what I did originally is they give you quite a list of items to submit to them. One of them is our operation plan, which hadn't been updated since 2007. When it was due again, in 2010 or 11, we went through a period of a couple of building officials, that one was from out of state that moved here and wasn't aware of it. Another one was an inexperienced building official after that one left. So that was one of the first things we did in October, was to update our operating plan to make it concurrent with the current OAR's administrative rules and also the revised statutes. So we have that, which we've already submitted to the state, and we are up to speed on that. The other thing we have to do is submit a staff certification roster, which we've already done. And then one of the last items is a list of fees that we have. In reviewing that, Katie handed out a little packet I put together for you today. With the exception of plumbing, mechanical, and electrical, this is our list of fees. Well, one of the things, having a building program with the state of Oregon, we're required, if we have it and already have those programs such as electrical and plumbing, that we have a list of everything we do and fees for that. And we, with the exception of plumbing, mechanical, electrical on the applications fees, that was it. And we do a lot more than this one page. So what I did is I got with staff, went through and we listed everything that we do, whether it's make copies or administrative charges, went through and we put them all together. We really want to be transparent. So when somebody comes to the counter or looks on our website, they can see what's it going to cost for me to re-roof my building or to demolish it. So we came up with some standardized fees for that. And what we did is we went 10 other jurisdictions in the region, everywhere from Beaverton to the city of Portland. We were considerably lower and definitely not the highest. We took the highest, I should say, and we tried to come in average. So with the proposal of adjusting our fees, we would still be just a little below average. The main thing that we've changed was, as an example, our building permits. If you have a building permit, a minimum fee for us to do anything inspection-wise was $40. And that was for everything, building related. We can't have a tech issue a permit, an inspector go out up to 5 inspections, and cover all of our expenses with just $40. So what I proposed was a minimum permit fee of $85. And then we have a fee methodology of how to get to our total costs. Those are consistent throughout the state of Oregon. So anywhere you go, we have the same methods there. So I provided an example as well. So if we have a let's say they're doing a $1,900 remodel to their house. The current fee for all your permits, if it included plumbing, mechanical, and electrical, would be $366. And that's for 16 inspections. And it's just not paying for itself. So with raising the minimum fee from 40 to 85, same factors. How we get to the bottom line doesn't change. It goes up to $27.55 for the inspections per inspection, and $440.66 for the permit fees for everything. So after we have our standard fee, then we have a factor of so much per $100 or so much per 1,000. All that stays the same. We're just modifying a few of them. And when I was talking about the standardization, if you come in for a demolition permit, it's based on value currently. Well, that's not really, I'm going to say it's not really fair to the customer, because it depends on how much it's going to cost. We generally do 2 inspections, maybe 3 if they didn't get it all right the first time. And charging somebody $750 to $800 for a permit to go out and look at, did they clean up the site, did they terminate the water in the sewer, isn't really fair to them. Just like it's not fair that we're doing it for $40. So we came up with a standardized list or price, I should say, of 3 inspections, $225. That's it. There's no plan review fee, there's nothing else, no administrative charges, other than the required state surcharge of 12%. So we came up with this list, and we met with we have a stakeholders group for community development. It consists of, and it's open to the public at any time, but our regular attendance is, we have contractors, architects, engineers, and a developer. And we ran that by them at the last meeting, and we're going to talk again before we meet with the City Commission to go over any questions they might have. At the meeting, we presented it very similar to this, and I reiterated to them that this is not to hire new staff. This is to maintain status quo. Our rent goes up every year. We haven't replaced vehicles. We have employee costs that keep going up, but we haven't raised our fees. So that's what we're trying to do, is just provide a clear-cut list for everybody, and also to bring them up just a little bit.
So I'm confused. Being an electrician, I pull an electrical permit, I do the work, I call for a cover inspection. For some reason, I fail the cover inspection. Something's wrong, I got to fix it. It's not something I can fix in 5 minutes while the inspector's having a cup of coffee. So he's got to come back out. Do we not charge for a reinspection?
No. Not for, and especially electrical, and I'm glad you brought that up, through statute, or through rule, administrative rule, you're allowed so many inspections for electrical. So if you take out let's just say it's for a circuit, one circuit, the first circuit's $90 without a service or a feeder permit with it. So circuit's $90, you get 2 inspections. Anything over that is at $85 per inspection. But that's not set by the City of Oregon City, that's set by the State of Oregon. So we have to follow that. The rest of them, plumbing, mechanical, electrical, fire, sprinklers, whatever it is, no, we inspect it as often as we have to get it passed, with the exception of if we wrote a correction item and we cite it through the code section what it is, and let's say there's several items, and you call us back out saying it's all done, and we go out and we look at our list and we look at the issue and we said, no, you didn't fix it, then we can charge a reinspection fee. And the reinspection fee, I think, is $85. And we're very, very conservative with those. We don't just hand them out. We try to work with the customers first.
Sure.
If it's a homeowner, we go the extra mile and help them and all along the way. If it's a contractor, a licensed contractor, we will give them usually, if we don't work with them every day, they're working in Oregon City, but they're from Portland or something like that, then we usually give them 1 grace inspection. But then after that, we warn them first, good result, and then a reinspection fee. And if it does, we've already told them.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Well, I'm a little more comfortable now, Mike, thank you.
Okay.
There was like 3 things that I noticed on here, that we had a $75 fee for desk. Somebody comes up to the desk or something like that, there's a $75 fee. Is that correct? Is that how I read that?
Is that the consultation fee?
Yes.
That's if No, it's not if they come up to the desk. If they come up and they have questions for a specific project, we'll help them out.
Right.
As an example, we've had, just this week, a gentleman came in that's doing 3 homes in the historical district. And he wants to, his comment was he wants to hire us to come out and tell him what to do. And I said, well, we don't do that. Yeah. I said, we're not for hire.
Todd says,
We'll tell you what to do for free.
So we told him, we said, if it's historical, you need to go to an architect or an engineer, and they'll do that for you. But this one's kind of a different one, and before he starts ripping open the walls to see what he's got, he asked to hire Christina and I to go out and take a look at it. And we told him, we'll give you a courtesy one. If we have to go out more than that, it's $85 to have us come out and look at it.
okay.
But not for questions.
So I had, but this is like a 62% hike.
Which one?
Well, I noticed that on that, if I get back into our report here, it looks like there was a 62% increase on something here. In order for these fees to catch up. Does that number sound right? I saw that in there
I think it was
someplace.
for-
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
should have,
That's the minimum from the $40 to the $85. I believe that's what it was. Overall, it adds, but I think it's just at the minimum. Once we start going from there, if you'll notice on the first page of the proposed fees, as I
Yeah.
was saying, the methodology, how to get there is the same. The only thing that we're bumping is our base fee of each valuation by the maximum, even if the project is valued at $100,000, we're changing it by $80 is all.
okay. And I guess the last thing I had was, there was, like you say, you have about a 6-month workload, and then it kind of tapers off, but you like to have financial coverage for that other 6 months, so you raise your fees to cover that, or how are you doing? So kind of in the real world, we lay people off when this happens.
Right.
But here you want to keep your talent base, so.
Correct.
Okay?
That's basically what that is by rule, we're allowed up to a 24, if we were at 24-month of reserves where we never have to sell a permit, but we could still cover inspections, we were required to lower our fees, and we do not have a 24-month reserve. I can tell you our exact reserve right now, but I know we don't have 6 months.
Less than half a year.
And that's if we were not to sell another permit starting today. If that allows us to cover our inspections for the permits that were already issued. That's what that is. And again, it's, with the exception of electrical, building, mechanical, plumbing fees are dedicated to cover those costs. Electrical can only be spent on electrical program, with the exception of we pay for the portions of the city manager and things like that we utilize.
Did we just hire another, well, you just got relicensed for something, didn't you?
Commercial plumbing.
Yeah, and did we hire another person here recently for?
We hired, I can't think the date, I think it was in September or August. We hired a commercial electrical inspector.
Okay, because that's gonna take the county stuff back in-house.
And it has.
Okay, good, thanks.
I think
We
that-
haven't sent anything to the county in a couple months.
Right, there was a couple that they had really close to being finalized, and we just asked them to go ahead and finish them because it really wasn't appropriate to change inspectors right in the middle of it. So
Okay.
It was one or two inspections.
Thanks.
So I'd like to thank you for doing the before and the after comparisons. That was really helpful in kind of following the changes. I noticed that you've added a lot of new fees. Were there any fees that on further look you decided you didn't need to charge anymore or weren't being used?
There are several, in this packet, I think there's 10 pages. There are several that we're not touching, such as plumbing, electrical, and a lot of the mechanical are not being touched. I said in this packet, I'm sorry, a few here, in the Exhibit 1, where the fee adjustment proposal, the very last sentence says we're not touching plumbing or electrical. And that's actually, I found out last week, it's false. We had to change, we're going to have to change a few because they didn't follow completely the methodology the state wants. So, and that's what, we're required to send this to the state to get approval before we request a public hearing. We have to have a public hearing, and we have to have that 45 days in advance to the state for notification to everybody. And so I've already sent this to them so they could preview it and see what they thought. And they came back with a couple that were wrong, so we had to fix them. And we're waiting. We've already done that. We're waiting to hear back from them. So once we've done this, then the February 20th City Commission meeting, we were there, or we're scheduled to be there to present our public hearing.
It's interesting, in this work session, we've first talked about increasing SDCs, and now we're talking about increasing building costs. And at a certain point, even though in both cases staff has shown that they're right in the middle, not too high, not too low, and that's where we want to be, but we also have to be cognizant that we don't want to make the burden too high that we're not becoming affordable anymore.
100%.
But we also have to pay for our people.
Right. So I have a question.
Go ahead.
So did the group that looked at this, did they also interface with the group that looked at the SDCs, and did they have any sort of, no, okay.
My understanding was that the SDCs had already been done before we started, or
Okay.
their forms had already been
Okay.
completed.
Because I agree with Commissioner Mangelberg. I mean, they're both, impacting the same sort of development, so, yeah.
And that's where we try, like I said, we're not, even though through rule and through our fee schedule, we can issue reinspection fees, or, you don't have your plans on site, well, that's $85. We don't do that, but it's there to use if we need to.
Okay.
But we just don't. The thing is with building departments or community development is the people that buy permits are our customers. And if we're not working with them, we need to be a partner. Otherwise, they're going to go build somewhere else, especially in this area where there are other places they can go build. So, when I was in Central Oregon, hey, we're the only store here. You got to come to us. We don't care. That's the way it is. But here, no, we can't. We got to work with partnership, and that's what we try to do.
Well, I appreciate that attitude, and the fact is that especially in inspection fees, permit fees, once the entity knows what they are, they're just a plug-in on the spreadsheet when you bid the job. So it's not really that big of a piece of what goes on in an individual, say, a plumbing or electrical permit or that kind of thing. The numbers on the permits are so small compared to the totality of the job. It's not that big a deal as long as you can predict it and pay for it, through your own costing out to whoever your customer is. So I think, SDCs are a different critter altogether.
Well, yeah, when you're paying $440 for a building permit, but you're paying $24,000 for SDC fees on a house.
Well, I've paid, companies have paid $50,000 for a fire alarm permit too, so, it just depends.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, so now the fun begins. We're going to take 16-004, the Buena Vista House structural issues. This is Mr. Archer.
Yes, sir. Mayor and Commission, we this is a continued discussion. You may recall that we discussed this at your work session back in September of 2015. And at that time, I gave you a report about the significant structural concerns and issues at the Buena Vista House. I'm not going to recap that because we've already presented that. If you have specific questions about any of it or need a refresher, please just let me know and I'll answer those questions. I attached a copy of that former staff report, and you've got minutes and so forth. At that work session, the Commission recommended that we continue this item and allow for some additional research time to review the potential issues regarding the house. Unfortunately, yet again, this building is another very big example of our deferred maintenance problem that we have. We've talked about that at length, and we don't have resources to do some of the things that we would love to do in our park system, and this is another kind of a big glowing example of that. What we've done in terms of any additional research or looking at things is kind of looking from the historic perspective of the building and any potential issues, concerns, or other important pieces of information. The one significant thing that we have realized since the last time that we discussed this with you, we told you at the last meeting that this was on this house, the Buena Vista Clubhouse is not on either the local register or the National Historic Register. So we've mentioned that before. What I wasn't fully aware of, or that I think kind of slipped through the cracks for some reason over time, just over the history of this building, is that we had never performed a survey on the Buena Vista house, an historical survey with SHPO to see if it even qualified as a potential for National Historic Register or that type of thing. And so that was something that I didn't include that in my staff report to you because that's even come up as kind of something that we've realized since I wrote the staff report last week. And what in some discussions recently with Christina Robertson Gardner, still here from when she was giving you the previous report, and so is available for questions. Christina is our historical planner, as you know, and with some discussions with Christina and Tony, we decided that it would be the prudent course of action before we take any further action on this would be for the city to perform a SHPO survey, which we submit, and then SHPO reviews to make a recommendation or determination as to whether the building is even eligible for National Historic Register, and that gives us some additional guidance as to the concerns I think that were brought up were, is there historical significance to the level that we should look at preservations versus demolition, and so to make sure that we've done our due diligence, the recommendation is that we simply step back a step and do that survey, submit it, review what the findings are, and then revisit that with the commission once we have that. And depending on where that goes, that may guide some of our decision making or allow us the ability to move forward with, if the city is not going to keep the building, that gives you and staff a better foundation of saying at least we've done that due diligence. So that's the one piece of due diligence that I think we need to do before we proceed. And that the timeline on that maybe a couple of months, maybe what's that? Yeah. So 2 months on the outside, hopefully. The building remains closed. You'll recall that we, our building official, actually Mike, prior to Mike, the building official deemed it a dangerous building, and we closed it at that time. And then when Mike came on board a little over a year ago or so, he kind of re-reviewed that and said that he agreed with that finding and did some additional findings of what the structural issues were for us, and we've got good information from Mr. Roberts on sort of the structural stuff. So we've kind of reassessed that a couple of times to make sure that indeed that it is what we think it is. So again, the building remains closed for public use. The timeline of taking the time to do the survey will not. There's nothing in terms of any timing specifically that will cause us any further harm. It's already been closed for a good period of time, and so it just pushes that out a few more weeks and allows us again to make sure that we have indeed investigated everything that needs to be done. Recently, also, we've heard some concerns from some of the neighbors that that they would like to be involved or a bit more apprised of what we're doing in terms of the building and potentially have some input opportunities. Certainly, we can do that. Staff can do that and just make sure that we're communicating with what is going on. Since no decision has been made at this point. Beyond just the fact that we're talking about it, really, that's that's kind of the main thing at this point. There has been obviously no decision made as to this date. The commission certainly can go whichever way you want with this, but that's what I'm recommending. And then one thing I would like to add too, Mr. Iceland is here tonight. Iceland Architects, I think many of you know the local architect firm. Todd has generously offered to assist us with some of the architectural review that would be necessary for this survey that we would need to submit. So that's appreciated, and we'll likely be taking him up on that offer. So with that, would be available for any questions. But again, right now, the recommendation is to continue this for another study session date until we've had the opportunity to do that survey with SHPO, bring back those findings, and discuss further actions.
So what's that survey going to cost?
I was going to ask that.
I think it's pretty limited cost. Christina, do you want to come up and address that? I think it's pretty minimal, and it's just mostly staff time, I believe, but I'll let Christina say that for sure.
Staff time costs too.
I agree. I know.
Hello. I think this all came up. I also thought we had a survey form for the Buena Vista House, and for many reasons, it fell through the cracks. And so it's always nice when you're having a city-owned resource to be able to, if it's over 50 years old, to have a survey form. Mm-hmm. And with its designation, either it's eligible for National Register listing or it's not eligible in current state or it's been altered. And we don't have that. We're just missing that data. And so I can work with SHPO to put together a survey form and ask for their concurrence of our findings. And I think it's helpful in the sense that whatever is decided, we're working on our decisions based on that kind of facts that come out of a survey form. So I do this all the time, and I work with SHPO on concurrence for things like we've done for the Ermatinger House, the library, and they provide agreement that based on our findings of a building's eligibility or non-eligibility. And so it's just a second eyes. And of course, any structure we own that has any structure that's 50 years or older, we have an obligation to identify them and then identify if they're potentially eligible for National Register listing.
So the question was, how much is it going to cost?
I think I will probably, between this visiting the site, taking the photographs, putting the form together, and turning to SHPO, I'm thinking maybe 5 hours worth of work.
And I don't.
That's a
my
guesstimate.
understanding is I don't think there's any application fee.
No, there's
or
no
anything
application
like that.
fee.
So it's
Okay.
staff time.
All right. So you say the building is closed. Is the building secured?
It's as secure as we can make it for the time being.
And how often does somebody check it?
Regularly, our park staff are Atkinson Park is one of the parks on our maintenance cruise route, so they do check it. There have actually been some times where they've noticed some activity, potentially people either living under the house or trying to live under the house, or maybe kids just being kids doing something, and we've addressed those immediately and maybe added some additional boarding around the foundation area or something like that. It hasn't been a real problem though, fortunately. So it does. While it's just sitting there being vacant, it's a potential liability, and there is some limited risk to that, but we're doing the best that we can to mitigate that risk, and of course it's on our city's insurance coverage, and so. But we are
all the utilities are shut off.
I would need to verify that. That's a good
Yeah, I don't
question.
know.
I'm not certain about that. Yeah, I would need to double check that. Yes? The answer is yes. Thank you,
Verified.
Mike.
Carol?
I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but process is very important. It's there for a reason. So the other properties, this one just fell through the cracks, having a survey for SHPO. So I think that's very important. And also that may provide opportunity for us to relook at it again, or a friends of group or something like that. And you never know. And I think it's important to know the status of this, and if this is historical registry, if it's potential for that. So,
Commissioner Smith?
So I appreciate the update and the recommendation. This has been a tough one for me, and I hate to see us, tear down any buildings in this town, especially ones that are historically important. So my question at the last meeting, making sure we did some work to find out the history of the building. Prior to the meeting we had last, I did some research on the building myself. Parks Department and Scott gave me a whole pile of stuff from the city's records. In short, what it seems is, it's 2 houses that were moved to the park in the about 1930. That doesn't, which is, I think, why for a long time people said, well, the building's 1930. Well, the building's not 1930. The building's early 1900s mashed together. So that's part of the reason that it's so complicated. I think, if we do an inventory form, that we need to make sure we include all the history and not just say it's 1930s. Because whatever we put on that inventory form is going to be how they determine whether or not it's worth saving or not saving, or either way. So I understand that we have to weigh the priorities of the Parks Department with this building. And, I know that this building is not probably the most important building in the city. It's probably not, well, I'll say it's definitely the most important building in that part of the neighborhood. And I will say that part of the reason that we need to look at this building is not the building itself, but the identity of a neighborhood. The Buena Vista neighborhood is an important place that has kind of lost its identity, a lot like some of the other historic neighborhoods in Oregon City have lost their individual identity. Lateret Canyon, Elleyville, these different neighborhoods. When we start taking away buildings that are marked specifically those neighborhoods. I remember when I was a kid, there was at least 2 buildings in Buena Vista, the Buena Vista store and the Buena Vista Social Club. The Buena Vista store is gone. As soon as the Buena Vista house is gone, Buena Vista neighborhood's gone. And so it's a real true identity to the history of that piece of Oregon City. So it's broader than just the building itself. Do we have to weigh that importance with all the other things that we do with the Parks Department? Absolutely. So my main goal here is to understand the history, make sure that if we do have to tear down a building, that we understand what we're tearing down, and that if that building disappears, that the identity of that place and that neighborhood doesn't disappear. So if it comes to a point where we realize that this is not an important building worth saving, to me that still leaves the question, how do we make sure the identity of the Buena Vista neighborhood stays? And how do we do that, whether it's an archway to the park or a commemorative plaque that shows the history of that place and that building? I don't know. But I feel like the neighborhood definitely needs to be involved in that process, and I think this is a good way to at least get that feedback, because now Buena Vista is part of McLaughlin neighborhood.
Mr. Shaw?
So I would concur with Commissioner Smith that we encourage the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association to kind of partner with us on this to figure out, especially if there's some creative little financing things we can do to maybe look at this, okay? So this is going to give us some time to do that. And also I'd like to ask Scott to see, is there a need for this space that this building has, within your inventory of meeting spaces? Is there a need for this size of a building that is going to be worth whatever we end up doing here? So
Yeah, we'll need to evaluate that. Just as a kind of a quick reaction, but not the full answer to that question, I spoke to that a little bit last time we had this discussion at the commission meeting, and I gave you some information on historical use, or at least a recent trend of use in the last, I think, 5 years before we closed it. And the usage of that building by the community had definitely gone way down. It was not being used very much for programming by my department. We've moved a lot of our programs into our two community centers, the Pioneer and the swimming pool. And, rentals and types of things that had happened a lot more frequently were kind of dwindling. I don't know why that trend was. Possibly the condition of the building, possibly just other alternative places to do that in the area. So yeah, the use was definitely down on the building, for actually trending for over a few years before we closed it. And so we would definitely want to kind of look at the need for the space per se.
Correct.
So it seemed to me that my numbers may be completely off, but it was like $2,500 or $5,000 a year in rental fees.
In that range, in that range, I believe is correct. Yes, relatively minimal. Yeah,
that would barely cover utilities.
It didn't. It wasn't, and we have to pay people to clean it and maintain it.
Sorry. It did not have a kitchen, though. It wasn't a complete facility.
It does have a kitchen, small kitchen area. Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't upgraded. Because I remember looking at that.
Yeah, it's not. It does have a kitchen, but I'll yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a commercial kitchen or anything like that, for sure.
It's 1930s.
Generally, we don't do citizen comment at work sessions. So that's been the rule of the commission for the last year. This will come before the city commission at some point, and I'm sure there's going to be some interface with the neighborhood in this next process. Is everybody sort of okay with letting staff go forward with their plan the way?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to say one more thing. I think we also have to remember that buildings are only utilized as much as we are willing to market them. And, so that's part of it. I think, we've had, and I'm not saying we have the resources right now maybe to do that, but we have to be thinking about things like why we don't have trolleys. We don't have the trolleys because we didn't market the trolleys and we didn't use them in a way that made sense, and so they had to go away. So, when we have these various resources in the community, we have to understand how to use them and market them in a way that we don't make them become unusable. And I will read, this is a discussion that happened in 1986. And for this same building, and I just highlighted this one piece of all this paperwork that Scott gave me, and I have to read it. And I'll take a couple more minutes just to make the mayor nervous.
No, it's fine.
It says,
What's the date on that? July 1st.
July 1st, 1987. Currently, a situation exists that the remaining club membership could abandon the clubhouse, which would leave an abandoned building located on city property. The city attorney advises that the city is legally responsible for the maintenance and the upkeep and liability for insurance purpose. The structure is well maintained, provides potential meeting space for a variety of community and civic groups, and has a long, rich history. It should be maintained for continued use. I find that interesting because it's about the same date that the city was given the Ermatinger House. So, which we let sit for 20 years, just like the Buena Vista House. So, Ermatinger House, probably more historically significant,
Yeah.
but still, the point's still the same.
Yeah.
And I want to make that point. If there's no other thing that this commission and hopefully commissions going forward is that just like our homes, we have to maintain our city infrastructure, and that includes the buildings. So there's, while I can't pretend to make different decisions than what, or change the decisions that prior commissions have done. There's no excuse for allowing the building at the cemetery to fall into the kind of disrepair it has. There's no excuse for that to have happened at the Buena Vista House. So, as long as we're here, I would expect that the city staff is going to take the position that we will maintain the facilities that we have. Okay?
All right.
All right, moving on. So we're going back, actually, right? So this is 16-009 Westland Park ballot measure discussion.
Wait for this
Thank you.
screen to come down.
I think it's an important subject, though. There's been a lot of things that have been torn down in the past.
The right opportunity, but if we start changing our rules every time.
Right. I agree. I'd be consistent.
Okay, so this is regarding, we're going to be talking about some property near West Leland Park. So hopefully on your screens, if you're looking at your screen, or if you're looking at the screen behind the commission, Leland Road. This is the kind of the back, what we might call the back part of the developed part of West Leland Park. This is the last of the ball fields where the path kind of terminates. This is city-owned property on this half of, so this pathway, which is not a real pathway, it's just a kind of what you might call a social or a goat path.
A goat path.
Where people have just pounded the ground down because it's well used, and I'm going to actually talk about that. So we own all of this undeveloped property out to Leland Road. There's a house, we rent the house out until such time that we make decisions. We've talked about master planning that, to add that to West Leland Park. Some things that have come up just in discussion have been adding more parking, because we've got a parking lot over way off the map over here, but we don't have parking on this side. Maybe another spray park and some other amenities. At any rate, we haven't made those decisions, but some discussions. As you all know, and you've talked about development tonight at length, this area, and again, I'm kind of going off the map just to show you, but there are many new housing units that have gone in since West Leland Park was even opened, and I think we opened it in '06. So in just that time frame, the usage on the Leland Road side has been drastically increased. And I would argue, with unofficial information but my own observation, and I just happen to drive back and forth this way a lot between work and home, because I live on the south side of Oregon City. This pathway you're seeing that so clearly because so many people enter from this development area or somewhere along Leland and come in. I actually see more walking users come in that side of the park than from the other side. Of course, parking more on the developed side. And that's going to come into play a little bit in my discussion. So what I'm bringing to you tonight is in regard to this side here, which we don't own. That is privately owned, and the owner of that property working with Icon Construction, and we've been talking about this for some time, and it's finally come forward to the point where they're ready to move forward on their development. The owner and the developer want to put in a 9-house subdivision on that property, so directly adjacent to our park site. The development of that subdivision, it's being commonly referred to as Parker Knoll at this time. I don't know whether that name will change or not. It will require the developer to construct a full width local street on park property. So this, what I'm calling the goat path, would become the local street. And most of that is on park property, some is on the private development side. As I just told you, we have discussed the idea of putting in additional development, and most likely that would include a parking lot. We would need a drive access to somewhere wherever we put the parking lot in within the park. And so that having that roadway would actually be advantageous to us with whatever we ended up doing. Additionally, the developer needs to construct an underground storm sewer easement from the runoff, and it would go. There's a second slide. Let's see if I can. Is it scrollable? Oh, I didn't realize it was down there. Thanks. So you've this was in your packet. The stormwater conveyance is. This is the park property. This is the road. These are the houses. This is stormwater conveyance across the park, and it dumps out into an existing stormwater system over in this neighborhood development on that side of the park. So we go back to the map now.
So is that
Oops, yes,
is
sir.
that conveyance built? Or
No, it would need, no, sir. It would need to be built. It would require a 15-foot storm sewer easement. So that's being proposed to be built that way. Another thing that would be advantageous is that at some point we would need to, if we develop out, we would need to tap into that, and that would then be in place. So that does help us.
So this roadway, they already have an easement, right?
Yes, you're
Okay.
You're exactly right. I was just about to get to that. So this is where it gets a little bit kind of interesting. So the proposed roadway, while most of it is on park property, we own that property with a deed situation, knowing that it says specifically that this adjacent property owner has a legal right to access their property through that easement. Legally, that's kind of interesting because it doesn't. We still have to give them permission to build a roadway, but we have to legally provide some type of access. So this is where. This is all kind of leading to the conclusion of my discussion. But they do have a legal easement through that portion of the property, and that goes way back in the deed. So back here, let's see. So yeah. So I was going to talk about the easement issue next. So the city and the developer, we've been talking for quite a while on this issue, actually several years. It's kind of started and stopped a number of times. But what we have discussed are terms which we have kind of reached at least at the staff level, a tentative agreement of terms that we would like to include in a developer agreement that would allow the developer to put in the road and those improvements that need to be done, as well as that storm easement, but with some substantial improvements that benefit the city, that benefit the park, that ultimately that benefits our citizens and our park users. And those are some wider walkways on the park side of the street. It's already being accessed. The folks coming in that way have to kind of stomp through a rutty field, and if it's wet conditions, obviously it's not great. So it puts in a hard path to get in, makes it easier. And we've asked for where the road will end. I think it's somewhere about in there. We've asked for them to continue a hard path into our existing loop path in the park. So give our park users and our citizens the ability to get safely all the way into the park, and some landscaping things on our side of the streetscape. So we believe that those benefits will offset the impact of the road. And the storm sewer is undergrounded. Once it's done and put in, you really won't see it, but it still nevertheless has to be done through an easement. So those are kind of the general terms. It would be brought back at some point to the commission if this goes forward in a developer agreement. But those are the general terms and the benefits of why we would want to allow this to happen. Because of the new road construction over park property and because of the storm easement, we believe that this would need to go to a vote of the people. We would ask for permission to do this. We have done this before. The most recent time is Oak Tree Park next to the fire station. We did a little sliver of a road through that park for a new development. That passed, and I think it passed pretty comfortably. And this, in fact, even provides, I think, arguably much more benefit than that may have. So we would recommend that this would go to a vote of the people. The developer, the reason why we're talking to you now is the developer is looking to put this, or has asked for us to move this forward for it to go on to the May election. And that would mean that things would need to move relatively quickly. We're talking to you about this tonight. We would like to ask for your direction or your support to continue forward and bring back to you at one of the next commission meetings a formal resolution to put this onto the ballot and allow us to go and ask the voters for permission to do this. And again, anything that we did would be contingent upon the terms that I've discussed, and those will be spelled out in an agreement in more specific form, which we would also bring forward. Let's see. So it would be the May 17th primary election. The city would be required to hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution. And again, that would have to be probably at the next regular commission meeting, which is next Wednesday, the 20th. If not at that meeting, it would be the one immediately following. But there's kind of a limited window of opportunity to get this done. So we'd be bringing that back to you relatively quickly. I think those are the main points I wanted to mention.
Okay. So, any questions, discussion?
Question on the park that's immediately adjacent to the development. Is there a long-term plan for utilizing that land, or is it just open space?
For our park property?
Yes.
Okay, so we definitely plan to utilize the property. We do not have a master plan for that portion of the property. The part of Wesley Lynn that was developed already was master planned a number of years ago and has been built to that master plan. Some or much of that property that is undeveloped has been acquired since the park was built, and so there has been no master plan done yet for that, but we intend to do that at some point to have a vision for that. So for now, it just remains as open space. Part of it is actually being used right now for one of the off-leash dog areas that we've designated. We've talked about those. And some of that open space basically kind of in this general vicinity in here. And so it is being utilized, but it's mostly just open space.
The reason for the question was if there had been a long-range vision, it'd be a way to get a developer exaction to help fund whatever that vision is, whether it's a tot lot or a whatever, something that is an additional community benefit.
Unfortunately, the development is ahead of our timeline on that. It would have been nice, but we haven't. We're going to talking about some of the improvements on the roadway. Look at potential things where utilities would land. I've talked about the storm easement, potential curb cuts into a potential parking lot location, some things like that. Even though we haven't master planned it, we would still look for those types of opportunities. But that's about as good as we can get right now. So.
That was going to be my question too. Can you make it kind of seamless into a parking lot, or do you have an idea of where you would have the parking lot?
We're
already?
looking at that. We're going to try and see what we can do. Yeah.
So just a couple of questions. So if where your little hand is, if you were to go up and to the right, there seems to be a rectangular space there that's just full of trees. Are there houses under those trees?
This right here?
Yes.
I think that is a storm detention area of some type, or it's some type of just a natural area. That's not the city's property. And
is that why, as you continue on over, there's this big set of trees there?
Yeah, it's there's runoff that I think that John.
Yeah,
can you help me here? I think storm conveyance goes through here.
Yeah, it's part of the platted development. It was protected wetland areas, and the neighborhood manages it and does a really good job with that, but it conveys stormwater.
Okay. Right.
Thanks, John.
I just didn't want to have the issue of, somebody wanted to build on those two things and, they thought they were part of the park, or the neighborhood thought that area was part of the park, and,
Not like that's ever happened.
No, not like that's ever happened.
So this is a little project here is kind of dear to my heart here, in that was on the Parks and Rec when Wesleyan Park was brought in, and there was this is one of the items that got cut from this, was trying to provide parking for the north side of this park.
Yeah,
and-
this was originally part of the, this part was part of the purchase originally, and then
Yeah.
we've since acquired in the last few years this portion down here.
So I'm wondering if, once this development goes in there, people are going to start parking all over that street that are going to start using this back part of the Wesley Lynn Park. So I'm wondering if we could convince Icon to provide, since they're going to be in there doing grading and everything else, if they could move over and do our side and grade it and gravel it, and just have a gravel lot there for now. And that would cure a future parking issue that's probably going to come up.
I don't believe that that would be legal.
And we have a house there too. There's a house there, so
There is.
Gravel
doesn't
parking
that
lots don't exist.
Well, I mean, just on behind that thing there, so.
As much as I would love to do that, because I agree, Commissioner Shaw, we are going to have some parking challenges. It's going to increase the usability of that side of the park. One of the things with the street is there's going to be some level of on-street parking that will actually benefit the park, but then we'll also have maybe some challenges with the new future neighbors with too many people parking. So I'm sure there'll be some designated parking and no parking areas. Pretty sure that the gravel lot isn't allowed in our code,
Right.
and so we'd want to follow that. But we've talked about, it's the cart before the horse. Could we come up with, and I've talked to one of our consultants that does park design work for us, could we come up with a way to design a parking lot ahead of the rest of the amenities? But the challenge is we just don't know what the vision is for the whole thing. So if you put something in there, it immediately kind of cancels out, how you take the holistic view to the site. So that's a little bit dangerous to do that.
So the city owns this 19174 lot as well?
Yeah.
And are we renting that?
Yeah.
This here?
Yes.
Yes. There's a house. It's you'll see that house if you drive by. It is occupied. We rent that, so we receive income from that, as we have other houses in the city on either.
What's that thing in the back of the lot?
That's a shed. And
big shed.
Pretty good size, yeah. And actually, that's Parks uses that shed. We store some smaller equipment out there, and it's locked up. And
Oh, so you don't need a new building then?
Oh boy! Problem solved. Just like that. Very small shed. No,
It just got a lot smaller.
So
Okay, so
I'm sorry.
we really don't know where we can put where we would put the parking lot, so we don't really know how to adjust that, and we don't want to kick the renters out because we're making money off of it right now, and there's no reason to do that. So, moving forward for this thing, I think we can safely say that we're going to move forward.
So if this goes on the ballot, would the applicant bear the cost of the election, or is he asking the city to
No,
bear that
the
cost?
applicant would be responsible for any costs.
Would.
However, Katie can talk to this, but I believe because it's a primary election, there is no cost for adding this to the ballot. Is that right? Yeah. So they would be if it was a special election, but there is no cost to this one. I think that's partly why they want to get it on the May ballot.
Well, I think
May
they
and
wanted to get it on
November.
the
May or
ballot.
November.
Yeah, I think they wanted to get it on the May ballot because they want to build it.
Yeah, of course, right.
Building.
But instead of, they could have put it on a March ballot, for example, but that would have cost them.
They're doing full street improvement, sidewalks both sides.
Yes, that's part of what we're asking is for that, in order to have permission to do that, is we've asked for full improvements.
Okay, so
Okay.
I hear no objections to your plan.
Thank you.
No?
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Okay. So the last thing on the list is 16-001, Draft Commission Policy 1-21, Charter Employee Complaint Reporting Procedure, Mr. Leffler.
And good evening, Mayor and Commission. Nothing closes out a meeting like a good discussion on personnel policy.
Second only to a report from Wyatt.
She's not here, so you have me. I bring before you this evening a draft policy, which I sent to you electronically last week. I drafted it. Our labor attorney has edited it, and then I sent it out. I have received some comments. I've responded back to some of those comments, but I guess I can go over the comments. Well, first off, are there any other additional comments or concerns with the draft as it is right now?
I emailed you some concerns this afternoon.
Yeah, I have yours, and I was going to speak to those, Commissioner Mengelberg. Anybody else?
No.
Okay. So Commissioner Mengelberg had a couple of suggestions. She asked that adding the words under the purpose of the policy to include the words malfeasance and violation of fiduciary responsibility to the list of possible offenses. My response back was that when I put allegations of misconduct, those types of things are included in our personnel policy 410, which are standards of conduct. So those are included in there as far as it's generally included in there. They're not specifically, but theft, criminal acts are included in personnel policy 410. So that as far as misconduct would go, that would be included in there. I can certainly, if the commission would like, I can include malfeasance and violation of fiduciary responsibility. But that's why I referenced those two policies. So does that answer your question? Is there still a desire to include that in there?
Well, the purpose of this effort is to make it clear to employees what kinds of things and what the process is for raising an issue. So the clearer we can be to everybody about that, I would think the better, and that's why I called it out. But
actually, to be 100% right on, this is about making sure that Mr. Leffler or his successor knows what to do in the event that someone complains about the manager or the judge. It's not so much for the actual employee or the judge.
Well, although, Mayor, I would say that, because the employees would need to know what they would have to do. And if they didn't know this policy existed and something happened, they might not necessarily, come to me, or they may do nothing.
Right, okay.
So and it is applicable to all employees. So that's the key. It's an employee policy only, even though it's a commission-generated policy. So anyway, I can throw that in there. Sure, I can certainly throw that in there as some of the other types of allegations that we would consider under the purpose. The other comment was immediately upon receipt, in the third paragraph, immediately upon receipt of the allegation of misconduct, harassment, or illegal unethical conduct committed by the city manager or municipal court judge, the request was to add available documentation or evidence to support the complaint, and then I was going to add if any. So really what was asked to be included was and available documentation or evidence to support the complaint, and I just said if any. So that's what I was going to add on to it.
Hang on. So are you saying that you're going to give that information to us?
No. That was just to be included in the policy.
So, okay.
In other words, I was not going to, although I wouldn't do it, but if someone came to me with a complaint without any substantiation, I guess well, actually, I won't talk for Commissioner Mengelberg, speak for Commissioner Mengelberg, but I think you said that, if there's documentation or evidence that they can provide at the same time, and I would ask for that from the complainant anyway, but I would need some facts before I would launch an investigation. I just not, he was mean to me or she was mean to me, and so that's really what was requested. And then lastly, there was the comment was that asking about you may also add the nature and submitter of the complaint that will be kept confidential by the city council, city attorney, HR director. And my response back was that in our Personal Policy 030, the equal employment and harassment, there is language in there that the complaint will be handled as confidentially as possible within the limits of the city, whatever the city can do. There's always, eventually, it's going to have to come out, but all complaints of this type of nature, of any disciplinary nature, are handled as confidentially as possible. So it is included in policy 030.
So, and I assume that when anybody is hired, they have to read the policy and procedures manual and sign off that they have done so and understand everything.
That is correct. Now, the only difference, and then part of it, 030, the harassment policy, it did not go up to the city manager, or did not include the city manager as if someone was to complain. If someone had a complaint, they would go to their supervisor, department head, myself, or the city manager. So that was the void, and that's the void that this policy will fix. The thing that we'll have to do is ensure that all employees and new employees get a copy of this policy and are aware of this policy, so that they know that there are the procedures for in the event of a complaint they need to make against the judge or city manager, that they know what to do.
So my rationale for that suggestion was that, not all complaints have merit, not all complaints have the same level of verification or detail or as others, and so we wouldn't want to embarrass anybody, either the city manager or the complainer, until it's been investigated. And it's not something, it should be held as confidential as possible, because it hurts morale and it creates unnecessary confusion if the details get out too much.
No, and I understand that. And I thought you were looking more from a retaliation point of view, and in 030 there is a specific paragraph that addresses retaliation. If the complainant feels that they are being retaliated against, there are immediate steps that take place.
Because we wouldn't want the policy to have a chilling effect, which is what was the problem. We would want people to feel free and comfortable to raise a concern with a reasonable expectation that it wouldn't become common knowledge until the right point in the process.
And still, I think back, I do redo the situation that occurred. Any complaint against the city manager it's going to be a big deal, regardless,
or the judge,
yes, or the judge. So it's something that is not taken lightly, and so I know it would weigh heavily on the employee for them to come forward and make that complaint. So that's a tough one. That takes a lot of resolve.
Part of what this policy says is to the other employees that there is a place, there is a procedure, and that we take seriously the fact that some people in places of authority can do bad things, and we want to make sure that they have a safe way to deal with that situation.
That's correct, yes, sir.
Well, yeah, I think it's really important to have an avenue, and that's what we asked for, to have an avenue for complaints to be filed against the judge or the city manager, and then you will make sure that they're handled properly and that type of thing. So I think that'll cover that.
And it puts in place in actual policy that the Human Resources Director shall notify the mayor and the city commission of a complaint, and that's part of where we had our little hiccup in our last situation. So if we hadn't had that intervening 2 days, I think some part of that situation may have turned out differently.
Right, and I think that's so important, since that is one of our major responsibilities, is to hire and fire the city manager to oversee that. That's the only staff member we do, so it's important to have that opportunity to know what's going on.
And the judge, too.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Any questions?
Okay, so if no questions or any additional comments, if you do, let me know, but I plan on bringing this back at next week's commission meeting for approval.
Okay. Just on the same note, but the other part of the procedure, have we discussed about including senior staff and those folks in the evaluation process for the manager?
We haven't gotten to that part yet.
All right.
We're just talking about the interviews.
Okay.
But yeah,
I just wanted to have, keep that in your head,
No.
that's another policy we need to work on.
Oh, so you want a policy for that? Okay. I will.
Well, a procedure or something, like we talked about before, that, the managers and I think even the mid-level managers ought to have the opportunity to participate in the evaluation process in some form in as anonymous a way as possible so that we can get information from inside City Hall, because we only have the ability to see, we're kind of outside looking in. And so we need to be able to have the intelligence from, the folks that are in here as to what's really going on. And if you get a person that is a very top-down kind of person, sometimes people are afraid to speak out, and one of the ways that we would be able to gain that information is through that participatory evaluation process.
So I know we discussed this 360. I didn't realize that you wanted to, but I can draft up something. That's fine.
Thank you. Okay. Everybody's good? All right. Mr. Manager, you have anything?
I don't have any updates for tonight.
I have one. I spent 3 hours today at the initial meeting of the governor's task force on the Willamette Falls locks. And a number of folks were there. Governor Roberts is actually the convener. And former Congressman Hooley was there, along with, too many people to mention. But the point is that we're all pretty much in lockstep that we feel like that the locks need to be reopened, that we can find a way to get that done. There are varying levels of ideas about how much it might cost. I'm thinking a lot less than what some people think. So I'm just letting you know that we started the process. We plan to meet once a month for the next 6 months at the end to have some kind of an agreed upon product going forward to as a plan to get the locks reopened. And again, we're working with the Corps of Engineers, and having been in the Army, nothing moves slower than the Corps of Engineers. So it may take a couple of years for us to get to that point. So anyway, I just thought I would give you that little update. Anybody else have anything?